So some Senate Republicans were baffled by this tweet from the president, which stated that he has a reinvigorated interest in splitting the health care bill into two bills. If Republican senators are unable to pass what they're working on now, he wrote, they should immediately repeal and then replace at a later date. We know from talking to Senator Rand Paul here that he and the president have been talking.
I spoke with the president this afternoon, and he and I kind of came up with an idea that I think is really a breakthrough. And this would be to separate this into two bills.
So here's what the president said about this in the past.
And there's going to be a period, if you repeal it and before you replace it, when millions of people could lose.
We're going to do it simultaneously. It'll be just fine.
So you can see why this has caused a bit of consternation on the Hill. Joining me now, Chairman of the House Freedom Caucus, North Carolina Congressman Mark Meadows. Congressman, good to see you tonight. Welcome back to the story.
Good to see you. Thank you, Martha.
What do you think about that?
You know, really, when you look at where Senator Rand Paul is, and actually where the president has been, it's all about repealing and replacing. He's committed to do that. Perhaps what is missing is the fact that Senator Paul is talking about doing it with two separate vehicles. The president has tried to combine that with one. But whether you do it with two separate vehicles or one, as long as you have a long enough glide path, and right now in the bill that most senators voted on in 2015, that was a 2-year glide path that allowed us to work on a replacement plan to make sure that there is no American that goes uncovered. And so, I think the president is very frustrated with the fact that the Senate is not delivering. But even now, as we speak, there's deliberations going on, CBO scores being taken to try to see if they can come to some conclusion.
So let me ask you, if the Senate were, it doesn't look like that it's possible, but if they were to split them up, of course, the big fear is that then the replacement would never happen. A lot of people would be left in the lurch in the middle, and that Republicans would be blamed for that. Is this idea of splitting the bill something that would gain traction if it came back to the House in that forum with the Freedom Caucus? Start with your own group.
Yeah, with our own group, I can tell you our original attack was to actually do it in two separate bills. We said, why don't we put the same thing on President Trump's desk that we put on President Obama's desk, but he vetoed, and then go along with that. I can tell you that we're so close right now. We're 1 or 2 senators away from getting a deal. I'm hopeful that the next 48 hours brings some of them together. But if not, I do believe that if we separate that out, you'll get real strong support in the House, 218 votes, hopefully that 51 threshold in the Senate. But then it's incumbent upon us to make sure there's a replacement part. And could you attach it to a transportation bill, some other must-pass piece of legislation where you finally get some Democrats to help us? Chuck Schumer has said he's not going to help with anything, but perhaps when you put it with roads and bridges that are important to all of us, they'll change their tune.
Very interesting. Congressman, thank you very much. Good to have you with us.
Martha.
Have a great 4th of July. All right, joining me now with some more, Mark Thiessen, American Enterprise Fellow and served as Chief Speechwriter to President George W. Bush, and Mo Alithi, Founding Executive Director of Georgetown University's Institute of Politics and Public Service. Both are Fox News contributors. Gentlemen, welcome. Good to have you here.
Good to be with you, Martha.
That was interesting. Mark Thiessen, it sounds like even on the House side, there is some opening among the House Freedom Caucus to this idea of splitting this thing in two. Good idea or not?
And terrible idea. Nothing would make Mo and the Democrats happier than if the Republicans went ahead and did that. Here's the reason why. Obamacare is imploding right now, and the Democrats own it. Every time that there's a state that announces, like in Ohio, Anthem just announced that it's pulling out, and there's 20 counties that have no Obamacare exchanges available, Democrats own that. When premiums go up, Democrats own that. If Republicans then repeal but don't replace, all of a sudden what's going to happen is the insurance markets are going to melt down. Millions of people are going to get pushed out of their care, and Republicans will own it, and rightly so, because they will have done it. And Congressman Meadows mentioned this glide path where, in the bill, they're talking about there will be a year where you could work on replacements, so it wouldn't take effect for a year. We're supposed to be the party of the free market, so we should understand that insurers are going to look at a bill saying Obamacare is over in a year, we're out. They're not going to wait. Yeah. They're not going to give us some magic way to keep Obamacare in place for a year while we work out a deal. They're just going to get out and move on with their business. So this is an insane idea that is the best thing that could ever happen to Democrats.
What do you think? So you like it a lot, huh, Mo?
Other than Mark's initial characterization of Obamacare, Everything else afterwards, I agree with. I mean, this is just politically baffling to me. I guess it makes sense in the sense that Republicans who are mostly concerned about their base voters who want repeal at all costs, they can say they did that. But it's those base voters who also are going to feel the brunt of what Mark was just talking about first and hardest. And we see that even in the polling, where most Americans, including most Republicans and independents, are incredibly uncomfortable with the idea of repeal with no replacement at all, especially against the backdrop of Obamacare's popularity actually growing in recent months. So you're taking away something that people are starting to like a little bit more and replacing it with nothing. Add to that now the conflict between the Republican caucus, right? A year from now, if they don't have a replacement, then it's all hell breaks loose. But even there's no guarantee they will when you've got Senate conservatives and Senate moderates in very different places.
You know, I go back to a point that we've talked about before, Mark, which is I think it's pretty shocking to Republicans that Republicans had all these years in the wilderness of sort of saying, gee, we really want to repeal Obamacare. And still, at this late date, now they're saying, well, maybe we can figure it out over the next 48 hours. How could they have not gotten together and said, you know what, if this ever happens and we get a Republican in the White House, we are so ready to go with this plan? I mean, it's ridiculous. No corporation could ever function that way.
Agree with you 100%, but there's a complicating factor for Republicans, which is that there are some people who just want to repeal Obamacare, and they have to take into account the fact they want to pretend that Obamacare never existed. And the fact is the Medicaid expansion took place. Millions of people got health care through the Medicaid expansion, and you have to find a way to transition those people out of it. If you're going to reform Medicaid, I'm all in favor of the Medicaid reforms in the bill, you have to find a way to transition those people out of Medicaid into private insurance with these tax credits that the Republicans are creating. And that costs money. You can't just do that for free, and some people don't want to spend it. They've got in this bill, there is a $700 billion tax increase for the rich, for people making over $250,000 a year, paid for by $777 billion in Medicaid cuts for the poor. That's monstrous. We should be using some of that money to help fix Obamacare, not fix Obamacare, transition people out of Obamacare into private insurance so that they don't lose their health care because Republicans came in and took everything away.
Quick final thought, Mo, and then I got to go.
Yeah, I totally agree with what Mark just said there. I mean, the way Republicans are they're acting like caricatures of themselves, right? Everything that Democrats say Republicans are, they are reinforcing it with this approach. I think it's very politically dangerous for Republicans.
Thanks, guys. Good to see you.